Hi everybody, we're going to kick off the WebEx now. What I would like to do first is just take you through a little bit of a story on what we're going to show you. Excuse the basic graphics that we're going to show on a little slideshow, but hopefully it'll explain to you what this invoice processing thing is all about. I'm just going to kick it off on here. Hopefully you can all see that. What we're actually doing today, first of all, a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to hold the questions off till the end. It tends to get a little bit manic with questions being fired all the time. So if you can, any questions you have, if you can just fire them off to Laura, and then she'll hand them over to me at the end of the session, and we'll cover as many as we can in the time we've got. Just stepping forward, what we're really all about on this session is pieces of paper, invoices. This is an accounts payable invoice, and that's the story we're doing today, is treating these. And the first thing we're doing really is to show you them getting scanned into the system. A typical environment is somebody gets hold of a piece of paper, it's an invoice, they'll put it through the scanner, and the system will start doing a little bit of magic. Dropping it through the scanner, you can also deal with things via email, you can drop them into a folder, but we're just basically showing them coming through the scanner for now. What the system will do is convert that image to a digital image, present it to you on the computer, and it will try and extract or OCR the information off the piece of paper. What this is showing is just being extracted, and it's got the key pieces of information we're looking for. It could grab every piece of print off the paper, but we've told it to only look for certain things. Stepping forward again, what it will also do at the same time is try and validate that information in some way. So it can look up to other databases, for example, look at your supplier database and say, right, I recognize this supplier, I'm going to tick the box, that's fine, I can move on to the next step. And it will do that for any of the fields. And at the same time, it's also checking that it is finding the values that you've asked for. As you can see in my example, I've got a £20 VAT line. It's making sure that the VAT's within tolerances, things like that. But the key really is getting the information off the piece of paper and onto your system. Moving on a little step, the next step for me is part of a workflow process. And as part of this workflow process, it's going to ask me to put some coding in. This is a step that is optional in the process, but it's something I'm going to show. So it's going to move the data from the piece of paper, present it to a user to say, yeah, we're happy, we've got everything we want, we'll step it another stage down the workflow. And this next stage is for somebody to do some coding on it. And if we set up a grid, fill in the codes, and now this information is actually ready to be sent to your finance system. I've got Sage, and I'll show you that in a little while, a little bit later on. But that's kind of the final step in the capture of information. So it's taken the information from the piece of paper and fired it into a finance system ready for posting. So I'm going to move off my little animation and start with some of the real work. And the screen now is Invu Capture. And if you can imagine that piece of paper I've put through the scanner is actually sent the information to this screen. Now it looks like an Excel spreadsheet. It's not, but it does have a couple of the abilities of a spreadsheet, sorting, you can add and move columns, things like that, but it's not there as a spreadsheet or calculation. What I've got sitting behind here is things you're probably quite familiar with, and these are invoices, accounts payable invoices. Show you another one. So it's just a selection of invoices. We've scanned them in from a select set of our customers, and the only thing we've really changed is the name of the organization, not only to protect the innocent, but also so it recognizes my system. The company that I have on my Sage is called Demo Limited, so in order for me to validate, I needed that company name on. I'll just close that down again. What I'm going to do is highlight everything and tell the system to recognize the information. Now, running in a live environment, when you put that piece of paper through the scanner, it will start appearing on this screen, and it will also do this recognize automatically. So you don't have to kick it off. It will do that process automatically for you. And what it's actually doing is going to the piece of paper and saying, right, is this an invoice? Is this a credit note? Is it the kind of paper that I'm looking for? In my case, I've just scanned invoices, so yes, it is. But if it didn't find that it was an invoice, it would ask you to tell it what kind of document it is. And the real reason that is there is so that, let me just minimize this down here. It's so that you know exactly what kind of information you want off the piece of paper. So it's saying if this is an invoice, then I need to take off VAT, net, gross, who the supplier is, and any other further information you require. Just making sure my antivirus is not slowing me down. It's running through every piece of paper to try and identify that information, and it's finding that by actually looking for the words. So it's looking at the piece of paper saying, this piece of paper that I've got here that I've seen, does it have the word invoice or tax invoice or credit note anywhere on this piece of paper? If it does, then chances are it is a credit note or an invoice. And this is what it's doing now. Whilst this is processing, what it will try and do is find the information off, and it will also try and validate it at the same time. So it's doing quite an intensive process. Because I've done it in bulk, it takes a little while to start up, but when you're scanning, it's actually bringing them in one by one and doing that process. And you can see as it's pulling the information in, it's actually filling in certain of the columns. For example, I've got the supplier name, I've got an invoice date, and a final total. So it's looking at the piece of paper and saying, right, here's a summary of some of the information you've found. Depending on what you want to see or what's important to you when you scan these invoices in, you can present that information on the form. So I'm going to do a little sort here. I'm going to sort them by what I've got green for export and I've got red for verification. Now, I'll open this first document and let you have a look and try and explain what export means in the process. Now, you can run in this dual view, so I could look at both screens at the same time. I'm actually going to enlarge this somewhat so we get a better view. So I've got an invoice in front of me. You'll see at the start, it's found the company. Now the first thing it's looked for is this document for Demo Limited, my company? If it wasn't, it would warn me and say, it seems that this is not for us, what do you want me to do with this piece of paper? And that's to just make sure we're not processing and paying somebody else's invoices. Moving on to the next step, I've said the first thing I need after the company is who the supplier is for this invoice. Now, it's actually found the supplier on here, but how it's done that, it's actually moved across and found the VAT number first. And we've called this our search terms, but it's saying, do I recognize this VAT number? Now, it's found the VAT number on this form, not by looking at the bottom left-hand side of the form, as it appears in this document, but by looking for the words VAT no, or in other cases, VAT registration number, or VAT reg no, or VAT no, VAT number, whatever iterations of that. So it's trying to find the information. It's also found the telephone number, the fax number, and the postcode of this. And that is just to reaffirm that it is the supplier that it says it is. If I've got the VAT number, if I go to my supplier database, have a look at that VAT number, does it exist on a supplier? Yes, it does. It should be unique, so you should get the supplier first time. Frequently, we'll use another field to validate that, so we'll also look up the postcode or the telephone number, and it's just to make sure we have a warm and fuzzy feeling about who this invoice is for. So having found the supplier, we've said, right, we need some more information. Show me the invoice number, the invoice date, the net, the VAT, the gross, and what the VAT calculation is doing. And it's actually doing a tolerance check on the VAT calculation. So it's saying, is it within a particular tolerance? On here I've got 17.5, 5%, and 20%. So it's falling within those tolerances. And this is just calculations that you can build on top of the forms. This is a default layout that we send out with any implementation, but you can amend these layouts on site and customize them for yourself. So if there's specific information that you require, you can add those fields to the form. An example of that would be the narrative field, where you could, I've added a narrative field here saying, well, I want to pass a story across the rest of the documentation, so I'll write a story in that field. Well, let me do something rather descriptive. This is for first aid stuff, so I'll pop in there first aid kit, something like that. You'll also see the bottom field on this says primary coder. In my example, as I explained at the start, I'm going to move this information down a workflow process for somebody to code. So it's asking me who will need to code this document first. And in this case, it's looking up to a select set of coders that I may have on the system. I'm logged in as demo. I'm going to be using demo all the time here, so I'm going to default it to the demo user. This information can also be defaulted from your finance system as well. So if you're holding the supplier name on your finance system, your authorizer's name on the finance system, it'll look up who should be authorizing as well. So that's the end of that process, really. It's found all the information. And that gives it the ability to be exported. It's got all the information I require. I can export it. Now, export actually means take it down to the next step, save a copy of the image, drop it into Invu, which hopefully you've all got, drop it into the Invu system, and also copy all the document references with it. So this process makes the capture of the document into Invu really quick, but it also copies a much larger amount of document references. So it's easier to search on things like amount. So if you're doing a creditor's recon at the end of the month and you're out by a certain amount, it'll allow you to search for that amount or the VAT amount, whatever it may be. But moving on, the real work in here actually sits with these items that need verification. And what this is saying, you'll see a little red flag here saying there's something wrong with this document, so it can't be exported. If I have a look at the first one, I'm going to double click on here. At the bottom right hand side of the screen is a field that says there's something wrong here with this invoice. Now, I don't want to abuse a solicitor, and hopefully they're not on this WebEx. They can't add. So this invoice says it's 700 plus 122.50 equals 722.50. So it's highlighted that to me. These can't add. What would I do in the real world? Probably delete this document. Maybe kick off a workflow and send it to somebody internally to follow up. But really, it's kind of a piece of junk paper for me in this case. So I'm just going to move on to the next one. I just click the button and it takes me to the next item that needs follow-up. In this case, there's a VAT calculation error. You'll find a lot of these on mine because my VAT's quite strict on here. And what this is saying is this VAT calculation is not within any of our tolerances. If I have a look at the invoice, it's actually got discount percentages on, so it's something to do with that. So I'm sure there's somebody out there that would be able to tell me what that should be, but I'm going to pretend I've got a calculator and check that it's right and override. So I can also add tick boxes to the document to say, yes, I can override this piece of information. We'll often find users that will require certain information to be checked on documents, and they would require a user to tick a box to say, yes, I've checked that specific item. In this case, I'm saying it can override, so I'm going to let it carry on and go to the next issue. With this one, this is actually where the layout, and I don't want to say everything's rosy with these invoices. This layout is a very strange one when it comes to the subtotal and the total at the bottom of the form. And that in this case, the system has said, well, I can't find the correct amounts. Things don't seem to be adding up. But if I come into this field and say, actually, the document says 149.39, tab off the screen, it's now quite happy, and I can move on to the next one. In this case, it's another VAT issue again. And it's found this is a pretty poor scan. I'm just trying to give you worst case scenarios here. That figure should actually be 200 and not 700. So this is the total sum of work that normally people would be punching information into the finance system. This is actually doing that work and doing that checking. Move on to the next item. In this case, it's for Juicen, and I have multiple Juicen suppliers in-house. So I would need to say, well, this one is Juicen in Wigan, and it's quite happy with that. And move on, and I'm going to tell it this one is also the same story. There's also another rule in here, and this is saying it's found a credit note. What we actually look for is the word credit note on a document, and it said chances are this could be a credit. Sorry, we look for the word credit, and this could be a credit. So can you please just check it for me? And if it is a credit note, yes it is, so we're not getting a credit note posted to the wrong side. It's just making sure it gets posted to the right side. And move on, and I think that's almost done. I'm finished with that process now, and you'll see I've only really got one left, which says it requires verification, but that's the one we want to delete. So I could come along, hit the delete button and say, yeah, I'm going to delete that. And what I have to do now is move these down the rest of the way. So I'm just going to select a couple of them and export them. And what that does, takes the document, puts it on Invu. It also prepares the data ready for import into the ERP system of choice. But the ERP system data will only be presented when it's gone through, in my case, a workflow authorization process. So it's going to take this information and send it down the Invu workflow as well as Invu coding for somebody else to do some more work on that. So that's kind of me finished in this area. I'm going to move over next to the coding section. Have I got my email open? I should also be popping up an email. At the same time as this document being exported, it will also send an email out to the authorizer. Now, in most cases, users turn that functionality off and rather send a journal, which is sent once or twice a day with any new invoices that people need to authorize, and then a large one at the end of the week saying, here's all your invoices. And as you see here, I've got this new task to deal with. If I open this link and click on the details, it will actually take me straight to the task that I need to perform. So it'll take me straight from my email straight to the task. I'm doing this on Firefox. You can use it on Google, Internet Explorer, Safari, use it on a mobile device, on an iPad. I use an iPad that does this functionality as well. If your eyes are really good, you can do it on an Android phone or an iPhone or something like that. It's just presenting it to you in quite a simple way. And what it's done is presented the invoice to me for Gibbs. I can zoom in, zoom out, fit to page, all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to scroll down because my eyes are shocking and gather the information off to see what I need to price up. And you'll see at the top of the form, similar to the grid I showed you earlier, it's asking me for an account, an amount, and a narrative. Now, it sent it to me as the budget holder. If this wasn't for me, I could pass it across to someone else, and there's a list of all the other users in the system. It's showing me just one account code, but you could code to as many columns as required. We prefer it to be kept quite reasonable, but if you want cost center, department, account code in there, 3 columns, and if you need to give it that breakdown, you can have that breakdown in 3 columns. You could also then default the information. For me, it's going to present the accounts I'm allowed to see, but you would present your cost center, choose a cost center, it'll narrow down the departments, choose the departments, it'll narrow down your coding choice. But in my case, it's presenting to me the account codes that I'm responsible for. So you can actually narrow down what users are seeing. So it could just be their cost center anyway, so all you would need to do is present the account codes. It's asking me, what does this work? Now this is something to do with maintenance, so I'm going to drop it into external maintenance. I'll put 3,500 and call this pavement. Enter the line, and it's just kind of like doing it in your finance system, so it's kind of like doing the coding in the same way. This has actually been distributed to other users. We do have several customers that send it to finance team first. They code it up and then distribute it for authorization. So it all depends how you want to use this system. My next one is further maintenance, and I do have the option of just typing. And as I type, it actually narrows down my choice of codes. So if you've got a user who's used to having a piece of paper on his wall with all the codes on, you don't really need that anymore. You can just start typing the words, and it will present the words or the numbers or both as I've got in mind. And I'm going to say, well, this is something to do with the office, and we'll call this. Well, let's put an amount, 3825.00. And call it flooring. Now you'll see on this screen the remaining balance is 3825, and that's basically highlighted in red to tell you not everything has been coded yet. I do have the ability to part code, so if I wanted to, I could actually come along and say, well, actually, it's not for me. Maybe it's for Harry to deal with in this case. But actually, I'm trying to keep everything in demo, so I'll leave it with myself. If it was for Harry, you'll notice on the right-hand side, there's the option to forward this document. So you can take the document, send it on to Harry to do his piece. When he does his piece, then it will be fully coded and authorized. I'm going to leave it in here. Let me drop back to that maintenance. Put it in there, and I've got flooring. And if I enter this line now, the remaining is cleared because I've actually coded everything on this document. And it's also changed on the right-hand side. You'll see it's now, instead of forward, it's accept or reject. Now, in this case, it's saying everything's been coded, so I can accept this transaction. And in my case, accepted also means authorized. Now, depending on the workflow that you've got designed, you could pass it to someone for authorization to say, here's the coding, are you happy with the coding? Or it could be, here's the invoice, are you happy with the invoice? So depending on what kind of next level user you have, they could amend the coding. It could go, for example, back to the finance team or the accounts payable team to check that the coding is correct and then put that, either correct it or accept it as it is. But I'm just going to accept this along the way and action that out and close. And what that will do is actually take me back to my next screen, so I need to come and code another invoice. Now we're on it is the 7th of May. It's a good way to remind myself of the date is looking at this. Here's another document that needs coding. Now, it could be that I wanted to reject it. Now, on a rejection, if I reject this, if I action a rejection, I can put in a rejection reason as well. And you decide what happens to this document from rejection. So you decide if it goes back to the finance team, if it gets deleted, if it goes to somebody else's information. You also have the ability to then put it on hold as well. So it all depends what kind of user, again, is the next step in this workflow process. But really, what I should be doing is coming along and coding and getting this out of the way. So I'm going to, well, we'll leave that one there for now, then I've got something to play with later on. I'll just exit out of there, and I'm back in my main screen. Click on tasks, and I'd just like to show you another one. I'm not sure how many of you are workflow users, but you see there's a slight difference in naming on here, and this is please approve this invoice. I'm going to click on please approve, and what this has done, this is a document that has passed the coding stage and has now gone on to somebody to authorize. If I want to view the document, I can click on view the document and it will present it to me as a quick view. It will show me the metadata that's carried with this document as well. And again, I get an approve and reject process. Now this doesn't have to be used along with coding, and this could be your normal invoice approval process without coding, and I would guess a couple of you using Invu Workflow would already have this kind of functionality. This is just using the Invu web client to deal with that. I've got the ability to approve, reject, select a rejection reason, add a note, just like I would in the Invu desktop. So that's approving an invoice, and let me get rid of that and I'll send it on its way. And that'll present me on the work. You will also notice I got another task to do. And this was the initial task now moving into authorization. So as many email reminders as you require would follow the email chain. It all depends, again, what kind of process and what kind of user you are doing. I'd just like to take one step back. When we talk about coding, there is the ability to code from within this screen. So several of our users have this to do a form of pre-coding. So before it gets sent out to the users, I'll pre-code it in here, maybe put a default code in from the supplier, something that could be automated as well. It all depends on what kind of process you're running in here. So you could have the grid screen that we saw in the coding module can actually be put in here. And if you don't really get your authorizers or budget holders to code, you could code the whole document up in this process and send it for authorization through the normal workflow process. Okay, so we've moved on, we've stepped through the workflow. The next step for me, and for if there's any Sage users out there, it'll be familiar, but for most ERP users, these systems are pretty similar, and I'm just going to click on my invoice entry screen. What has happened in the background in the database, by me approving those transactions and coding, it's actually said this is fine to now be sent off to my ERP system. Now, this is using the standard Sage APIs and the Invu API, and what this has done is presented my information that I've just captured. So there's my transactions of my pavement and flooring. We've presented it in a batch, and it's something we like to do is to present an invoice batch to you that your finance system could actually do further validation on. We prefer to do that because it'll do further validation on things like nominal ledger codes, account ledger postings in case something's been suspended or removed in the meantime between capture process and posting process. But it will present the batch to you. Other systems will do this on a call up the batch basis, where you store a file and it pulls in an XML file or a CSV file straight into an automated batch. It's the kind of thing that people do regularly with the EDI, and it uses the same functionality as you would use for EDI to get the information into the system. So there's my batch. If I want to post it through to Sage, I just highlight that and say post that transaction. In the Sage piece, I do also have the ability to manually amend the batch, and you would find that with most ERP systems. If it's importing on a batch basis, you do have the ability to amend the batch as well. So as a final step, and just in case, somebody could go in and review it and review the coding. But there's been so much validation along the way, it will probably, and in most cases, be correct at that stage. So that's the little Sage piece. To show you a little bit more on a little bit of fancy stuff, we do have some reporting on top of this, and mostly this is about the workflow tool. If you do have the Invu workflow, you do have the ability to use SQL reporting services, which is what I'm using here, and you can get some quite effective reports out of the system. This may look fancy and took a little bit of time to do, but it's just to give you an idea of where you can get to in the system. You could just have simple audit trail processes, so I could just show you an audit trail report, but this is showing a lot more information with the invoices. Because we have them in flight a lot of the time, it's tricky to find out where everything is. And if you're using physical paper and distributing them out for coding for somebody to do it manually, you never have any idea where your invoices are. And this is actually showing the status the invoices are in. So these are awaiting a goods received note, and this is just workflow steps. This is saying who's got them, so I know what departments have them. How many I've captured, how many have been approved and rejected and in process. So if you want to do a month-end accruals report, you can actually do it from here. So you no longer need to register your invoices in your finance system as well. If you want to go down a little bit of a blame capture here, this is showing what user and how long they're taking to get things authorized. This is showing a director as being the one who's taking the longest to approve. This is actually a real report that we have on site at one of our customers. The second iteration of this report did not have this director of housing on, so the chart looked a lot better, and he didn't get any fingers pointed at him. But you can narrow this report down and say things like, well, just show it for one department, just show me the development department, let's see their report, and it'll give you an idea of how many invoices they've processed and authorized and how long it took them to approve. So if you're doing KPI-style reporting, it will also help you with that process as well. And the be-all and end-all really is the documents are in Invu. You also have the ability within Invu to administer these workflows as well. So if this should hopefully be familiar to some of you Invu users. On the right-hand side, in the center at the top here, I'm actually going to change my filter, and I'm going to say show me all the coding tasks and show me all the tasks for all users. And that is showing me all the invoices I have in process. These are the invoices that are sitting in the coding process, and it's asking somebody to code this invoice. But I have the ability from here to reassign this document, to restart the workflow. I can obviously view the document from here, but it's kind of an admin tool that's available for whoever's controlling your accounts payable and your invoices to do a little bit more work and a little bit more detail. So if somebody's away, I can come and highlight all their invoices and reassign it to someone else if I wanted to in here as well. If I'm really short on time, I could accept them all if I wanted to, but I think that'll figure out somebody get a slap on the hand for doing that kind of thing. Let's have a look at one of these documents. Double click on it. As you will see, it also carries all the document references with it. So you've got a lot more information. I've got the VAT total, the supplier, the date, the subtotal, whatever it may be, and you've got a lot more information for searching. But this is just now moved into the standard Invu desktop screen. That's pretty much the end of our story. We've taken a document from a scan, taken it through this process, done the verification to make sure the amounts are correct, got the document, sent it through to the coding, asked somebody to code it so we can get the information into the finance system, and ended everything up in the finance system. Well, thanks everybody. We're going to shut down and end the WebEx session. I hope you'll join us on the next one. If you have any questions, you can send them off to marketing@invu.net or give us a call on extension 206. And any other topics you may have, let us know about them.